All right, now the next step is to actually titrate. So we actually need to do two sets of titrations. Our first set of titrations are going to be to standardize the sodium hydroxide that we prepared earlier. We're going to do that with our primary standard, the oxalic acid. Then we have a second set of titrations. Once we know the concentration of our sodium hydroxide, we can run another set of titrations with our unknown acid to then figure out the concentration of the unknown acid. So let's start with the oxalic acid titrations. So right here, I have what is called a burette. Okay, it's this long thing. It's got a stopcock on it that I can open and close in order to control the flow of the sodium hydroxide. Before I actually use the burette, the first thing I need to do is what we call condition the burette. I need to make sure that I'm getting the best concentration of that acid possible, or not that acid, that sodium hydroxide possible. Sorry, it's really hot out in the garage, even with my portable AC unit running in the background. So I need to make sure that I get the best concentration of that sodium hydroxide possible. So to do this, I need to make sure that there's nothing else inside this burette. So I need to condition or prime my burette with my solution before I actually start titrating. So I'm going to get out my sodium hydroxide here. And I'm going to make sure that my stopcock is closed. And then below my eye level, I am going to pour in a little bit of my sodium hydroxide. Now you can do this with a funnel. I don't use a funnel anymore because I've been doing this for so long that I actually find it easier to do without a funnel, but a lot of people do this with a funnel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to coat the inside of this with my sodium hydroxide and run it up the back a little bit. Okay. All right, it drips on the back a little bit. So I'm going to just take a little towel, dab it a bit so I don't drip sodium hydroxide everywhere. I have gloves on, but it gets kind of slippery, so I want to make sure I don't make my burette slippery. I'm going to do this again a couple of times. Okay. Again, I'm just using a little bit each time. I don't need a ton. I just need enough to coat this burette with that sodium hydroxide. Okay. One more time. Okay. Right. Okay, there we go. That looks good. And now I'm going to put some into the burette. And I'm going to open up the burette. Let a bunch flow through the tip first. All right, that looks like it's good. Tip's coated, it's flowing well. Now I can fill the burette. Now I don't need to fill the burette exactly to the 0 point. All I need to do is make sure that when I go to do my experiment, I record the initial and final volumes. Okay. I'll pour it up close to the 0, that way we have plenty. Okay. All right. I filled my burette. I'm going to cap my sodium hydroxide now. Here's the thing, sodium hydroxide, if you leave it uncapped, it will absorb water from the air. So I'm going to cap the sodium hydroxide, and I'm going to put this little cap over the top of my burette just to make sure that while I am working, I am not absorbing water from the atmosphere. Oops. I have these at a kind of an unusual height that I'm used to doing work at because I am trying to make it so that you all can see what I am doing. Okay, I'm going to move my waste beaker. Now, really important is we need to make sure that we add our indicator. When we get to the end point, when the moles of acid in the flask equal the number of moles that I'm going to add of base from the burette, my indicator will change color. We're going to use phenolphthalein. If you recall, phenolphthalein, when it is in a colorless state, it is either in an acidic or a neutral solution. Okay? So right now, I have an acidic solution in here, which means that when I add the phenolphthalein, it should be colorless. Oh, okay. My phenolphthalein has some of the solvent has evaporated a little bit, so the tip is clogged. I don't have a time to unclog it right now, but I am going to come over to my lab supplies behind me here and just get out a plastic. And I will unclog the phenolphthalein later. All right. I'm going to use a plastic pipette. All right, so you only need a couple of drops. Okay, there we go. All right, now, oh, I got a little bit on the tip there, which is okay. So I'm just going to rinse that down with my DI wash bottle. Throughout the titration, as we go, we can rinse with the DI bottle. Again, it's moles equals moles, not concentration equals concentration. So if I add extra water in, I'm not changing the total number of moles of anything. So it's okay if I add extra water, which we'll need to do as we rinse stuff. Now, this is gonna be a little bit challenging because you do need to read the burette eye level. So I'm gonna have to climb on something. Which sometimes we have to do this in the lab anyway, but I'm gonna get up here to read my burette at eye level. I can also bring it down just a little bit here. Okay, now when we read the burette, we want to make sure we're reading it down and we are also reading the meniscus and the correct number of significant figures. So I have major marks every 1 millimeter. I have minor marks every 0.1 milliliter, which means that I can read this out to the 0.01 milliliters. Okay, which when all is said and done, we're going to get a total of 4 significant figures for our volumes. Well, that's usually the not the reason. Now, it can be a little bit hard to read it in open air, so we usually put something behind us. So right now, I'm reading this at 0.89. Okay. In subsequent trials, I'll be taking pictures for you to read, but for this first one, I'm going to read it. All right, so this one is 0.89 milliliters. Okay, now I am ready to begin titrating. So I can start off with adding a decent amount of the sodium hydroxide. Okay. What I'm looking for, especially in this first trial, is I'm trying to get a good idea of where that endpoint is. Hopefully we'll get it really precise. Okay, so we're gonna run it wide open to start with. Now, as you go, you'll start to see little bits of pink. Okay. I'm starting to see at the interface some pink, but then when I swirl it, it goes away. Okay, so at the interface, I'm getting some pink. When I swirl it, it goes away. What we need is we need the pink color to persist. And we need the pink color to persist as faint as possible. Normally when we use phenolphthalein so far, we've seen it turn bright pink. We don't want it the bright pink. Bright pink this time means we've gone over the endpoint. We want it as faint as possible. Okay. So run it wide open. Run it wide open. Oh, we're starting to get staying a little bit longer. Okay, I'm going to pause now because I'm running it wide open, so things are splashing a little bit. So I'm going to rinse a little bit. Okay. Run it wide open. Okay. Should it persist a little bit longer? When it starts to persist a little bit longer than this, now is when you want to just add smaller increments. So I add a little bit, add a little bit, add a little bit. Ultimately, we can get this to a point where we start adding it dropwise. You can see, hopefully you can see a little bit of the pink, yeah, as I'm adding it, and then it goes away. It's definitely hot in my garage. My goggles are fogging up really bad, which is not normally a problem for me. Okay. Keep going. Getting close. The longer it persists, the closer you are to the endpoint, and so the slower you want to do your additions. A little bit of a drop on there. These can be so precise that half of a drop on the end of the burette tip can be the difference between colorless and a bright pink. And we're getting closer and closer. Try to do this a little faster than I would do if I wasn't on the video. I know sitting and watching, waiting for this to go when you're not the one doing it is probably not the most exciting thing. All right, that looks like it's getting pretty close. Almost there. So now hopefully we're close to that drop or half a drop point. Rinse that a little bit off. Okay, still went away. We need the color to persist for at least 30 to 60 seconds here. So getting super close. Ooh, almost there. Hopefully only a little bit more. Okay. There. I put in 2 drops so you can see just 2 drops. Turn it bright pink. We want to get it fainter pink than that. But for a first run titration, this would not be a bad result. All right. So now, once again, we need to get to eye level. Thankfully, this isn't too far this time. And now I can read my burette. And I can get, let's see here, 26.21 is where I'm at on that one. All right, and then my initial volume subtracted from that final volume gives me the volume of my sodium hydroxide. All right, so I'm gonna run a couple more of these. I'll post pictures for you so you can see the next couple of them. So you don't have to sit there and watch me run the titration, and I'll run them a little bit more careful. So the pictures I post will have definitely a fainter pink to them because I will be running them a little more careful and won't be on camera trying to finish up for you to be able to see. All right, the last thing I'm going to show you in the 4th video is prepping to do the hydrochloric acid titration, okay, which is our unknown acid or acid of unknown concentration. All right, so that is our standardization.